thank you for having us. My name is Nikki Neuburger. I am the Chief Brand and Product Activation Officer at Lululemon. I am super excited to be here with Charlie, who will introduce himself in a second, to talk to you all about something very near and dear to the brand of Lululemon's heart, which is community, and how we're really focused on community as a core pillar of building brand equity, both in the short and the long term. So thank you for being here.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. Hope you're good. Give me a wave if you are. You okay? Okay, good. This is good. My name is Charlie Dark, MBE. I'm a DJ poet, founder of Run Dem Crew, and I've been a Lululemon Global Run Ambassador for about 6 years now. Yeah.
I definitely thought it was longer. We debated this last night.
I think it might be a bit longer.
Yeah. So I figured we'd start, because Charlie has been an ambassador with us for several years, as well as an ambassador with other brands as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what has felt different about this partnership from the start, sort of in a world where all brands are hoping to build community, lean into community. What has felt different about how that's worked with Lululemon and you?
I think first off, there's shared brand values between Lululemon and Run Dem Crew and the Run Crew culture that I've helped birth. The second thing I think is Lululemon has a habit of assembling the Avengers of creative and interesting people whenever we gather at things like the immersion. And I met some really interesting people at Lululemon events. And I always had to say this story about, there were 2 guys I knew who were like delivery drivers. And the very first Lululemon event I went to, they were there. And I thought they were delivering drinks to the event. And I asked them what they were up to. And they said, oh, we're adventurers now. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, we decided to jack in our jobs and we just rode the Atlantic. And it was kind of like your UPS driver suddenly turning up a week later, having done this really epic feat. And that was really inspiring. But I think the most important thing is the brand sweats with the community. And so often when I've worked with brands in the past, they view what you do via Instagram. Whereas with Lululemon, they will actually come to the sessions and run with you. And if there's ever a community event, they always arrive before you, and then they help you clean up. And they're very good at kind of reaching out to you in times of crisis and asking you what you need. So invariably, I always feel empowered when I work with Lululemon, which I haven't felt with other brands. Other brands, I feel like I'm there to help them sell products, whereas with Lululemon, I've always felt it's a bit like my family who are looking out for me. And if they do well, I do well, and then we all do well together. So that's the thing.
Awesome.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, so what I'm going to ask you is, obviously, brands partner with ambassadors, but what makes it different about your approach? How do you partner with them? And what's the balance between global reach and local credibility?
Yeah. Well, for those of you who maybe are not as familiar with Lululemon, we have been around for about 25 years, but less than that in Europe. And the brand was really built off the back of local communities. So we'd open a store in a specific neighborhood, and the store actually selected the ambassadors based on who was really building community, fostering community in and around that neighborhood. So a very grassroots up approach. Again, you mentioned it. It's always starts with values. Do we stand for the same things? Is the purpose and the drive and this desire for progress through movement and through community, is that a shared mission? And ultimately, as we've grown and scaled, we've introduced other types of ambassadors, as you know. So we've got still store ambassadors that are attached to every store we have in the whole world, upwards of 750 at this point. We also have key city ambassadors. So that would be, if you take a city like London or a city like New York, where we have a lot of stores, we're actually identifying ambassadors that we actually feel can move around the city, but also represent different neighborhoods and communities and activities. So we've branched beyond yoga. We've got a running leader here. We're deep in training. I'm here for Wimbledon, too. We've got tennis and golf ambassadors. And then in the last few years, we have added what we refer to as global ambassadors. Charlie is a global ambassador, and that is somebody with reach and connectivity beyond their continent, really.
Yeah.
So you would have seen us introduce some of our elite athletes. We actually hosted an event with Lewis Hamilton yesterday, who's one of our ambassadors. So it really is sort of like this tops-down reach and scale, still very, very connected and rooted in purpose and values, and grassroots from the bottom up. Who is the instructor that you're training with on the weekend in your neighborhood? I would say how we actually work with folks different is we don't have as many ambassadors or folks that we work with as many of our competitors because our relationships our ambassadors are really rooted in building relationship. We want to get to know people. We want to know what your goals are. We want to support you in those goals and vice versa. We don't think we can do that if we have hundreds of thousands of people we're trying to work with. So it's fewer, deeper, supporting your community efforts, but then also really leveraging you to help inform our product. So a lot of product feedback and a lot of event co-creation as well, which I know Charlie's been involved in. I did want to ask you a quick follow-up on this, though, because Charlie actually emceed our event with Lewis yesterday and was integral in creating a meditation, a guided meditation that Lewis reads as a way to sort of slow down before he speeds up into racing. I wanted to ask you about what that experience was like.
Well, first of all, it's kind of like, you know, an honor and a blessing to be asked, because essentially, again, it reinforces the fact that you're working with a brand that trusts you, and that isn't often the relationship, you know. And it was kind of what I thought was really interesting is the brand listened. So it wasn't a case of go and write this thing in our tone, but it was kind of go and write in your tone. And there was a lot of back and forth and a little bit of tweaking, but it came out kind of, you know, in a really nice way. And it was great. You know, it's really interesting to kind of work with someone on that level and actually feel that you're actually really working with them. So it was kind of a lifelong goal has been ticked off. And that often happens when I work with a brand.
It's amazing. I would say that is another thing that feels really different about our group. I mean, at Wimbledon this week, we had Jordan Clarkson, who's one of our NBA athletes, actually go and support Leylah Fernandez and Frances Tiafoe. So our folks are friends. So the authenticity and, again, the relationship building is very, very core. And I would say, like, key criteria, we're not working with people who don't want to make new friends. So it's really, really important. Okay, I've got one for you. Let me see which card. Okay, when you think about the word community, what does it mean to you in how you live, how you lead, and most importantly, how you connect with others?
Okay, so the first thing is community is not a buzzword. And I say to people that I build, grow, and nurture communities. But what I really mean now is I build, grow, and nurture movements because I want to empower my community so that they can replicate what we've done and then go and do it again. So that's really important. And for me, community is intergenerational. It has to be diverse. It has to be a reflection of the city that your community is in. So for example, with Run Dem Crew, when I look at the pictures at the end of the run, I want to see a reflection of all of the people that live in London. And I always say to people, as a DJ, the best parties I've ever played at are ones where there are lots of different types of people in the space because they all bring a different type of energy. And that's really important. If I look at a picture of a community and it just looks like I'm looking in the mirror, then I've failed in my job, you know. And I think communities have to inspire other people not to be like, I wish I could do that, but to be like, well, if they're doing it, then I can definitely do it too. Because you cannot be what you can't see. That's really important to me as well, you know. And, you know, I think it's kind of, community extends beyond the brand activation. And it's people who will help you even when there's nothing to be gained for them. It's this idea that we're all lifting each other up together and that we're all part of this giant movement that's trying to shift the needle of change. We can't all do it by ourselves, but we can shift it a small amount and maybe inspire some other people to then shift it again. And that's, for me, is what community is really about. You like that? I want to ask you this question. What advice do you have for brands who are trying to build community in a meaningful and not performative way, and why?
Ooh, I think first and foremost, knowing who your brand is really critical. Being super clear on what you're about, who you're for, why you exist, who you aim to serve, what your values are.
Yeah.
Because like attracts like. And that can still mean and include and should include diversity, but I think that values-based connection is critically important versus buying a face or a name or followers to help build your brand. It feels transactional. Your consumers can tell it's transactional. So my advice would be to really know who you are so that it's easier for you to be able to tell if you're in conversations with the right folks to represent your brand, because for us, our ambassadors are our brand. More people will interact with Charlie on a daily basis than anyone will ever react or engage with me, and they will feel something about Lululemon based on the human connection, which I think is really important. So really thinking about that the people that you're working with are the physical manifestation of what people are going to think about your brand, think about the products, and vice versa. When you think about who to partner with, you have to think about what a brand is doing to your brand as well. So I think really, really important. I mentioned authenticity is key, and for us, that also means long-term relationships. So Charlie said he's been here 6 years. It feels like more. I've known Charlie for a really long time. We've done this at other places. But I can't think of many people on the roster who aren't multi-year relationships. And we've even got what we call legacy ambassadors, so people who have moved on to other things in life but are still very, very connected to our brand. So I think, again, just really core for it to be rooted in values, for it to be long-term, to ensure that it feels authentic. And some of that authenticity is how we're working together. So again, back to how are you using ambassadors? We're not using them just to be a poster for campaigns. It is to get real product feedback. It is actually to give us feedback on how we're showing up. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest differences with us is we get some real harsh and direct feedback like you would give to family members and friends when we get things wrong. And actually being open to that feedback, our ambassadors are making us better. And I feel like that conversation goes two ways. And then ultimately experiences, because as I often say, Lululemon actually doesn't own any community. We're facilitating communities that already exist and enabling them to grow bigger or do things that maybe they wouldn't otherwise be able to do with their own means. But it is Charlie's community that we are a part of versus Charlie is a part of a brand's community, because that's not a real thing.
I think the thing as well is if you're a brand and you're partnering with a community, ultimately you're partnering with an expert who knows more than you. They've managed to do something that you haven't been able to do, and they've managed to reach people who are very difficult to reach. And so if they're the expert, you have to listen to them when they're telling you the good stuff about what you're doing and the bad stuff as well. And also this idea of kind of, we partner together so that we can do things that we can't do individually. That's really important as well, So yeah.
I'm going to take the advice question a slightly different way, which is, do you have any advice for these folks in terms of what not to do to build community?
I think what you have to really understand is, for some communities, partnering with certain brands is a social kudos, because we've been indoctrinated into the value of that brand from when we were kids. The idea, if I wear this brand, then it gives me some kudos in my community. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. And it's really important that, when you're partnering with a community that you're not destroying the community before that community gets a chance to thrive. So one of the things you can't do is come in and say, well, I like the look of that person, they look good in the product, so I want to work with them, but I don't want to work with that person because they're too old, or, you know, or they're the wrong shape, or the wrong size, because the two things work together. I think it's really important to realize that what the community doesn't need product. What it needs is knowledge. We don't need a basketball coach. You know, we don't need a new basketball field. We need you to come in and teach the kids how to become basketball coaches. We need to learn how you do what you do, because ultimately, and especially with community, we're aspiring to do the jobs that the brand do. But often what happens, we're not allowed behind, you know, to see what's going behind the curtain. We're kind of kept at bay and then wheeled out when we're needed. So that, you know, those are some of the things. And you have to come down to the sessions and do the thing that you're asking your community to do. There's one thing I know about Lululemon is if they say to me, oh, you know, we've got an ultra marathon that we want you to run, there's going to be 10 people from the brand who are going to run it with me. They're going to sweat with me. They're not just going to be watching comfortably from the bus. So they're going to feel my pain and my ups and their downs, so they understand what it means to run a marathon. They understand what it means to basically be in a space when you're the only one there and you're feeling like maybe you're an imposter. They're willing to hold your hand. And also I think this idea of kind of at all times going out of your way to empower the people that you're working with. So what was really interesting for me during the pandemic, where most brands that I was working with disappeared for 2 years, I got the Lululemon call, which was like, what do you need? Do you need a life coach? Do you need a therapist? What does your community need? And for me, that was kind of like, wow, you're really looking to take care of me and empower me as a leader, even though the world is shutting down. And that for me was a real kind of like, oh, these guys are serious. You know, they're really about this. That like, and that for me felt like more like a friendship as opposed to a business contract.
Yeah, and I would say on the other side of that, when there is trust, which you can only build over time and by doing things together and getting to know each other, both sides work harder for each other versus like a contract where it's like, okay, I don't know them, but they've paid me a certain amount of money and I owe them 3 appearances and 5 posts and I'll be done with it.
Yeah.
It feels different when your relationship manager is one of your very best friends in the world.
Yeah.
And whether they need something or you need something, somebody's there to have your back. So
Yeah. I mean,
you reminded me of something. I wanted to tell a story.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, I knew Charlie before I came to Lululemon, and he was one of the first phone calls that I made when I was interviewing. And you shared the same sentiment with me about like, Nikki, it's real here. Like people are actually participating, are members of the community. They're not just folks in an office building sending an email hoping you can rally the troops this weekend.
yeah.
And when I made it to the actual interview, and I learned that our CEO and our head of people and culture, so the head of HR, not only ran the Lululemon Seawees half marathon, but they led pace groups, which, you know, that means they like carried a backpack with a sign and helped a group of people achieve a goal. And this was the CEO. This wasn't like, you know, the head of community or a 20-year-old marketing manager. This is the guy who's very busy and has lots of things to do. And that's what he wanted to do that day. And not just run it, but to help other people was like...
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Blew my mind.
Yeah.
And ultimately was one of the reasons that I chose to come all in. And you vouched for them, so... That helped as well. Well, I know we only have a couple minutes left. Is there any sort of final thoughts or something you were hoping to cover, wisdom to share with this group of people?
Wow. That's a good one. Well, one thing always say, it's not how fast you go, it's how you cross the finish line. And so sometimes, you know, when you're building a relationship, it's going to take time, you know, because you're essentially planting seeds, and then you have to nurture and water that forest. It doesn't happen immediately. And so I think it's really important to decide, do you want a quick return, or do you want a life-changing return? You know, and if you want a life-changing return, that's why you do the work. If you want a quick return, there's other ways that you can make it happen, you know? So yeah, that's the thing.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're very welcome indeed. I think that was okay.
Thank you all.